You're tuned in to the ultimate countdown of the scariest moments in NBA history. Because this ain't your average basketball countdown. We're talking about the moments that had the streets buzzing, the moments that made grown men cry, and the moments that left fans shaken. And coming in at number 10, it's the tragic story of one of the biggest prospects in basketball history, Len Bias. See, in 1986, Bias was on the top of the world, fresh off being drafted by the Boston Celtics after becoming the second overall pick in that year's NBA draft. But just 2 days later, in the early hours of June 19th, 1986, tragedy struck. As just before people knew it, Bias had died of a cocaine overdose in his dorm room, sending shockwaves throughout the basketball world, as the city of Boston and the entire basketball community were left in mourning. One of which was none other than Bias's good friend and rival, Michael Jordan. Speaking of which, MJ also had a close call himself. It was Game 5 of the 1997 NBA Finals, a game infamously known as the flu game, because the night prior, MJ was up all night with a relentless stomach virus, as just earlier in the day, bro was getting a little hungry. So my man did what any hungry person would. He ordered pizza. Only something felt off about this pizza delivery. After all, he ordered pizza from Utah, the home of his opponent, the Utah Jazz, which was already bad enough. But it gets worse, because this particular restaurant sent not one, but 5 people to deliver pizza to MJ's hotel room. So clearly something smelled fishy, but MJ didn't care. It was pizza, for crying out loud. However, you better believe bro paid the price of eating poisoned pizza. But once again, he didn't care, because the following day he showed up to the game and put together a performance for the ages. Because despite barely making it to the bus, my G scored 38 points and secured his 5th championship with the Bulls. A true testament to Jordan's competitive spirit and his ability to handle adversity. But up next, it's a moment that was years in the making, the famous Tim Donaghy scandal. From most's perspective, Tim Donaghy, a respected NBA referee, was living the dream, courtside at the biggest games, calling the shots and getting paid. But little did the world know that behind the scenes, he was making a killing on the side by betting on the games he was officiating and passing on the information to gamblers. An issue which came to light in 2007 when the Federal Bureau of Investigation began an investigation, forcing Donaghy to play his hand and plead guilty to 2 felony charges. Yikes, this dude just went all in and lost it all. But now it's time for our first honorable mention, a different type of scary, Karen Butler's addiction to Mountain Dew. As Butler will tell you, playing in the NBA for 14 years wasn't easy, so my man did one thing to help him cope, drinking large amounts of Mountain Dew during games and practices, which eventually became so bad, he even tried to hide his addiction from his teammates, such as Kobe Bryant. That said, his coping method was better than consuming drugs, although it still came with some severe consequences: sleep loss and weight gain. In other words, his addiction to Mountain Dew became a major factor in his decision to retire from the NBA, affecting his health and ability to perform at the highest level. But enough about mountains. The 2011 NBA lockout, which is essentially another way of saying that the players and owners had beef. It all started when the previous agreement expired and they couldn't agree on how to split the money. The owners wanted a hard cap and the players weren't trying to hear that. Anyways, long story short, it was a long and dragged out process that lasted for 161 days. So as a result, the season got cut short, while players had to go overseas to make money and the league lost major ratings and attendance. In other words, it was a lose-lose situation. But eventually, they came to an agreement that included a new revenue sharing system and a luxury tax. That said, let this be known as a harsh reminder of the struggles the league goes through to keep both the players and the owners happy, and the impact that it has on fans. And speaking of keeping people satisfied, no one was happy about Derrick Rose's injury, because one moment, he's the youngest ever MVP, leading his team to the heights of the Eastern Conference, and the next, he's hoping to be half the player he once was. Cause in the playoffs of 2012, Derrick Rose tore his ACL, and the rest was history. As sadly, Rose was never quite able to fully recover his pre-injury form, despite making a comeback with Minnesota Timberwolves and Detroit Pistons. Because bro went from 22 points and 7 assists per game to just 16 points and 4 assists 2 years later, proving that an athlete's career is fragile and in the blink of an eye, your whole world can change. Which takes us to our second honorable mention. And believe it or not, it's also our second dangerous addiction. Only this time, it revolves around Hall of Famer Charles Barkley, a player whose insatiable appetite for gambling was the stuff of legends, and he wasn't afraid to admit it. See, Barkley would often be found at the casinos, placing bets on everything from sports to cards, since on various occasions he would often spend hours, even days at the tables. And if you know anything about gambling, your luck runs out eventually. Barkley was no different, since one night he lost a whopping $10 million from sports betting. That's right, you heard it right, $10 million in just 6 hours. But despite this setback, Barkley couldn't stay away from the gambling scene. He was just too addicted to the rush of the bet, the thrill of the win, and subscribing to the channel. Anyhow, this brings us to the time fans were stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time. The date was May 25th, 2015, and fans came to watch the Rockets and Warriors battle in the Western Conference Finals, when instead they got a lot more than what they originally paid. Cause following the Rockets' 128-115 Game 4 victory, it appeared nothing could go wrong that night for the Rockets, only Mother Nature had other ideas. By hitting Houston with a massive flash flood, leaving the streets flooded and freeways blocked. So as a result, the fans were advised to stay put in the arena, and what started as a fire drill-like situation turned into an all-night ordeal, as the arena turned into a makeshift shelter with fans huddled together trying to find some comfort. It was like a scene out of a disaster movie, but for real, because many were stranded for almost 11 hours until the early hours of Tuesday morning. That said, it still doesn't compare to this next moment. Just ask Lou Williams. After all, the 76ers guard was simply minding his own business and driving around Philadelphia neighborhoods, moments before his life was put in jeopardy. Because the next thing Williams knew, there was a carjacker outside his car with a gun pointed directly at him. Yeah, this wasn't going to end well. Or so we thought. Because after rolling down his window, the carjacker immediately knew he'd made a giant mistake, since the same dude he was about to shoot was also one of his favorite basketball players. So instead of killing Williams, he quickly apologized and told him he just wanted to put some food in his stomach, to which Williams responded by treating the thief to a meal at McDonald's. It's not every day that a carjacking ends with a meal at McDonald's, but then again, who can go wrong with a Happy Meal? However, now it's time for our 3 scariest moments in NBA history. And trust me, these moments will knock your socks off. Only, up first, it's time for our final honorable mention. It was Super Bowl 56, Bengals vs. Rams, which just so happened to be near Draymond's club in Los Angeles. In other words, you already know bro had to attend the game. However, this decision came with a massive cost. And I'm not just talking about money. Because amid the biggest football game of the year, a burglar broke into Draymond's house and stole some of his prized possessions, including expensive jewelry and watches. So much so, the items stolen are estimated to be worth more than an unfathomable $1 million. Now, that's a tough pill to swallow. Just like what the Milwaukee Bucks dealt with in the 2020 NBA bubble. A time when basketball suddenly seemed so irrelevant, in the wake of the police shooting of Jacob Blake, a black man from Kenosha, Wisconsin. So as a result, the Bucks decided to take a stand against injustice and racial equality by using their platform to boycott their playoff game against the Magic. My G's are real ones for this. Unlike Gilbert Arenas and Javaris Crittenton of the Washington Wizards, because in 2009, Arenas brought some heat to the locker room over a gambling debt beef with his teammate Javaris. By doing the unthinkable, he brought 4 unloaded guns to the locker room. And if you thought that was crazy, it only gets crazier. Because apparently, this gambling beef was so deep, Arenas asked Javaris to end the beef right then and there by shooting him with any of the 4 guns, which obviously was a bluff. However, this bluff quickly backfired as Javaris quickly responded by pulling out a gun of his own. Only this time, it wasn't a bluff. This was a fully loaded gun, and bro pointed it straight at Arenas. Sheesh, these dudes were really about to have a Western standoff in the locker room. However, it still doesn't top the scariest moment in NBA history, because it was on January 26, 2020, when the world lost a legend, a true icon, the Black Mamba himself, Kobe Bryant. See, Bryant was on a helicopter with his daughter, Gianna, and 7 other passengers headed to a basketball game, when all of a sudden the chopper went down in Calabasas, California, causing every last person on that plane to die, including Kobe Bryant and his daughter. And to put it mildly, this wasn't just a shocking loss for the basketball community, it devastated the entire world. Because it was on this day that one of the world's most accomplished and inspirational figures was taken way too soon. Rest in peace, Kobe and Gianna. You're missed.